Hi, today in sheet metal layout we will be forming up a galvanized squared around transition. And one of the first steps in making a galvanized squared around is punching the fitting into the computer so it can be direct downloaded out to the CNC plasma table. So you bring up the squared around fitting icon onto the computer. You would then punch in the width 10 inch, the depth 10 inch, and the diameter 10 inch. And the length today will be 12 inches long. We will be doing a centerline offset, so the width and the depth are centrally offset. And also we'll be picking the gauge to be 26 gauge galvanized in a 2-inch pressure file. And we will have the slip and drive for the rectangular end connector. And we'll have a small end collar on the 10-inch round with a 3/4 inch lap. And the next step is to accept the fitting, and then you would send it out to the table to be downloaded, and that's where we're going next, to the CNC plasma table to download this fitting. Okay, and now we're out in the shop, and as you can see I'm wearing my gloves and my safety glasses. It's always important to be safe when you're out in the shop working. Now what I did was I downloaded sheet number 222560. That's what it was on my CNC. It's been downloaded into the CNC plasma cutter, and now we're going to cut out the pattern, and when we get done cutting it out, then we'll go over to the forming operation. But basically, to cut it, plasma machine's on, the exhaust fan is on, we have the table blanked off to keep the smoke from getting into the air. We always want to exhaust the fumes from a plasma table out, so it's important to blank off the table when you're cutting. And here's how you cut on a plasma table. Here we go. Okay, now that we are done cutting out the patterns on the plasma table, we come over to the handbrake, and this is where the real forming begins. I have already set the handbrake. I've pushed the arm to about a 20-degree angle, and I have a vice grip holding the arm at that angle, just like so. The vice grip acts as a stop, and then you just grab the pattern with the S and drive notch on the left hand side, starting at the very end of the round, and you put in a series of kinks. You put in about 9 or 10 kinks, space them about 1 inch apart, and you just walk it out. You leave this notch exactly where it is, and you walk out the right hand side. You just keep walking this pattern out. Try to evenly space them all the way out till you get to the center pattern. Okay? Then you start over here and you start kinking from here all the way across to here. And once again, 9 to 10 kinks about 1 inch apart. So we come in here like this, start with our first kink. Then you just start spinning it out, keeping this notch where it's at, and try to evenly break the squared around. And the very last bend. Okay, and then you come over here. The ends have to be square, so give it a little Little hand tweak right like that. And the other end should look round like that. It should be about 10 inches in diameter like that. Okay. I had already formed up the other pattern. So that's how you form up the pattern for the squared around. We're not done yet. We have to fasten everything together and we have to make a collar. So let's go over and get these pieces fastened together. Okay, now that we've formed up the squared arounds, we have both the patterns. They already have a notch in them. So you just take the pattern, line up the ends so the ends are flush, and you're covering that whole notch. So you're lining up the ends so the end touches there and there. And then we come over to our Norlock machine and you put in a series of quick locks. Okay, as you can see, the end is flush. This end is flush. You flip the pattern over, square it around over, and you do the same thing to the other side. If you formed it upright, it doesn't take a lot of effort to hold it. You just line up the ends like that, so they're lined up. Come back into the Norlock. Get one about there, one about there, and now that holds it. Then just march them right down the front. You want to space these about an inch apart, and now the squared around is together. Now we need to make a collar for the top, and that's what we're going to do next. And now we're over at the power roll. I've adjusted the power roll for a 10-inch round collar. This is a 2-inch collar we'll be putting on a squared around. Simply put it into the machine, step on the pedal, and you roll up the collar. Now, as you notice, I overrolled the collar. You should always overroll the collar, because when it comes time to quick lock it, it's always easier to hold the collar that's overrolled than one that's underrolled. So next step is back to the Norlock machine again. Okay, and now that we got the collar rolled up, you will see that there is a 3/4 inch scribe mark already on this collar. So we just simply take this over to the Norlock, line it up, making sure we keep our fingers out of the way. Put one about in the middle, and then one on the end. And we also want to make sure we're about a 1/2 inch up from the bottom, because we don't want this bead of the Norlock to interfere with our connection on top of the squared around. So we got our squared around here and the collar. We need to take the squared around over to the burring roll and burr out the end, so it makes it easier to put the collar on. I'm going to show you how that's done right now. Okay, now we have the squared around over at the burring roll. The burring roll set at a 1/2 inch. Simply put the squared around into the burring roll, and you turn the pressure down until you just touch the metal. You don't want to crank it down and cut the metal. You just want to run it down to where it just touches the metal. With your left hand, you want to hold the squared around perpendicular to the floor. And what this does is it stretches the end of the squared around to the proper angle to form to meet the collar. And simply hold the squared around at an angle, always trying to keep it perpendicular to the floor. You just work it right on around. And you're done. And see, what that does is it puts a nice 1/2 inch line in there, and it gives you something to line the collar up with when you put the collar on. Okay? So let's go back to the Norlock again and fasten the collar to the squared around. Now that we burred out the end of the squared around, we're ready to put the collar on. Now the collar, you just start a little bit on one side, and then you work it on with your fingers around the edge. This can be a little tricky sometimes. But once you you get it on, you take your hammer, and you get a little tap, and get it all lined up with that burring line. And that's pretty close. So what you do is, you come over to the Norlock, and I like to do this in quarter sections. I'm right on the line right here. I put one Norlock right there. I spin the fitting 180 degrees so I'm at the exact opposite side. I make sure I'm lined up, and the collar is lined up with my burring line. I put another one there. Then I spin it 90 degrees, so I got one here, one here. I'm going to put one right here. We're still on the line. And then the last one, I put one here, here, and here. Now we simply put one here, line this collar up. Okay, now that I have 4 of them on the squared around, now you just simply march around about an inch apart. And now the collar is on the squared around. To finish the squared around, now all we have to do is put the elbow lock on the collar, and we also got to put the drive on the bottom. So let's go do that right now. Now that we've got the squared around collar on, now we need to run the elbow lock on it. And what the elbow lock does is it helps to seal the collar to the body of the squared around. So let's put this in the machine right now. We got it set at 2 inches, and we just want to snug the handle up a little bit. You don't tighten it too tight, just snug it a little bit. Step on the pedal, and run it around the machine. Once you've made 1 revolution, give it about an eighth of a turn on the top again. Run it around, and now you're done. And then what you see is you get a nice fit between the collar and the squared around body, and that keeps air from leaking, and it also stiffens the collar and gives it some strength. Now we're going to go over and put a drive on the end, and we'll be done. Okay, and now we're over at the drive cleat turner, and since this is an S and drive connection, we simply stick the end of the squared round in the drive cleat turner, lift up on the top handle, release the bottom, drop it down, and it puts a little 1/2 inch open hem for your drive cleat. Flip the fitting 180 degrees and do the same thing to the other side. And there you have it. This is a 10S to 10 drive to a 10-inch round squared around fitting, and that's how you make one. And if you got any questions, just give me a call at my office. I'd be more than happy to give you some more tips on how to make this squared around.